Oh my god, Vista is actually so nice. Like, I love the multitasking and the arrow, and it looks so good. The main problem with Windows Vista. Microsoft's Vista problem. 13 reasons why Vista is crap. Vista sucks performance. Oh, hey, I heard you upgraded your whole setup to Vista. How is it? Oh my god, I can't believe you just asked me that. It is so garbage. Like, honestly, it's one of the worst operating systems that Microsoft has released in years. I cannot believe Microsoft would release such a pile of garbage so
Bro,
fast.
what's that BO? I bet it's this guy.
Jeez.
Vista is, okay, people do not like it. Like, seriously, when I was a kid, the only thing I knew about Vista was that it sucked. My dad and all his friends constantly made fun about how bad it was. But let's cut the clutter. What was actually so bad about it? This one's actually mad. People hated the constant interruptions when they were trying to open any kind of program. I guess it is a bit annoying compared to XP. Also coming from XP, Vista seemed to be a huge memory hog when checking the memory usage. People were used to seeing most of their RAM free most of the time, but with Vista, it seemed to be full all the time. Oh boy, the most common criticism was that Vista was just so goddamn slow. It's because it was filled with all this bloatware that was taking up system resources, so the recommendation was to go back to XP or go into Task Manager and end specific tasks. Vista tended to have a lot of blue screens, quite often. That is also a very common complaint. Yes, very annoying. On top of that, Microsoft during this era made the bizarre decision to have a bajillion editions of Windows. This was not just Vista, Windows 7 also had God knows how many editions, and it seems like it was strictly a monetary incentive, with Home Basic being $199 and Ultimate being $399. Double the money. And there were differences in these editions, like Home Basic did not have the very beautiful arrow theme that we love so much. That was a Home Premium and Up feature. Or some didn't have the remote desktop connections, and you had to figure out which edition had all the features that you wanted, but no unnecessary features because it was $400 for an operating system. Okay, so to judge Vista, I needed to use Vista. I mean, I did use it a lot as a kid, but I needed a refresher. So I looked online for an ISO and made a bootable USB, which used the Windows 7 bootable USB creator to make the Vista USB bootable. I'll explain later why that makes sense. Plugged it in and... At this point, I was starting to get frustrated, and this video was going to be a lot more heated. But after trying a few more things, it occurred to me that the ISO itself might be broken. So I found one on archive.org, which was hopefully untampered, and voila, we're in the setup. And immediately the upgrade is clear, since we no longer have the old blue text mode setup. This is a lot more pleasant, and within no time, we're at the desktop. Although more problems were coming. This PC I'm using is the same one I use for XP, and has perfect Windows XP support, and perfect Windows 7 support, and Windows 8, and Windows 10, but for some reason, Windows Vista is the only child left out. I got the LAN drivers, which were thankfully still available for Vista, and the audio drivers, which were the same as XP. But for some godforsaken reason, Intel does not have their integrated GPU drivers, which meant generic VGA drivers, which meant no Aero. And for some goddamn reason, the XP 64-bit drivers wouldn't work because it said, oh, it's only for Windows XP, and the Windows 7 drivers wouldn't work either because it said, oh, it's only for Windows 7. I was going to give up, but my Discord community came in clutch and hunted down the integrated graphics drivers for Vista, which did exist, but for some reason Intel had taken them down, so I had to download them through the archives. But once I did, we now have the beautiful arrow theme. And now that I've hunted down all the drivers, Vista is actually pretty usable. It's convenient, it's fast, it's reliable, and it's gorgeous to look at. Did we just go through the problems? Shut up, I'm explaining. A lot of Vista's problems weren't really problems, but rather features that were just ahead of their time. The user account control that people hate so much exists today even on modern Windows and even on Mac OS. Although Vista does go a little overboard because it prompts you even when opening internal Windows apps, the memory hogging issue was really just a misrepresentation on Microsoft's part, since the RAM was so full because Vista kept it loaded with frequently used programs so your computer could be faster. The system requirements were so high for the time because Vista was kinda ahead of its time. I mean, this beautiful arrow theme does not come for cheap. Personally, I still prefer this look over Windows 7, or even Windows 11. The numerous blue screens weren't directly Vista's fault. Most of them were caused by bad drivers, with over 30% caused by NVIDIA drivers. Vista is significantly different from XP. So is Windows 7, by the way. So a lot of old software and drivers didn't work as is and had to be updated. And I guess this is where Microsoft kinda dropped the ball. Vista is just not as stable as XP, and XP's rollout and compatibility were far better than Vista. In fact, the reason why people hate Windows XP 64-bit is the same reason why people aren't big fans of Vista, because they're both based on the Windows Server 2003 kernel, and both, from the ground up, are built for x86 64 or 64 bits, and not the still widespread i32 or 32 bits. A lot of people have the same complaints about Windows XP 64 bits regarding the compatibility, but you see now that it was necessary to switch to x86 64 because 64 bits was the future. We still use 64-bit computers. I guess 2007 was too early to switch though. And another genuine complaint is Microsoft's stringent DRM and pricing. I remember in 2009 I activated so many Windows XP installations with one product key, but Vista was a different beast. Not only was Microsoft being extremely greedy by creating all these different editions and charging exorbitant amounts for them, you had all these different product keys for these different editions, separate ones for upgrade editions, and if you wiped the computer and had to install it again, the same product key wouldn't activate it again, in which case you were screwed. It was just a giant mess, and taking out shit like Arrow from Home Basic was just unnecessary. Vista's development might actually be the answer to Vista's problems. It was troublesome to say the least. The original plan was Blackcomb, which would eventually be Windows 7, was to be the successor to XP, which was codenamed Whistler, and Longhorn, aptly named after a bar between the two ski resorts Whistler and Blackcomb, was to be more like a stepping stone. And the leaked builds reflect this. Early builds showcase a newer look, experimenting with newer themes like Plex, Jade, Slate, but all in all, more of XP and a fresh coat of paint. After all, it was to be released just 2 years after XP in 2003. Nothing really revolutionary planned. But somewhere along the way, Microsoft lost sight of what they really wanted Longhorn to be, and started adding features that were originally meant for Blackcomb. And before they knew it, Longhorn had become a bloated and unstable mess. Each iterative build actually gets worse and worse instead of better. The more crap they added, the more unstable the operating system became. And then there was a question of, if we add everything to Longhorn, what do we leave for Blackcomb? Shit the fan in 2004, and development was completely reset to start again, this time using the Windows Server 2003 kernel as the base, which, as we discussed, is 64-bit, but doesn't play as nice with older programs. So, in essence, even though Vista took 6 years to come out, it really only was developed for 3 years or so. This is when what we really know as Vista started to take shape, with the name, the icons, the GUI, the arrow theme. But since Microsoft had taken their sweet time developing it, features had to be cut in order to make the deadline. The immensely hyped WinFS, which actually sounded like a great idea, was basically a new file storage system that used relational databases to store files so that you could quickly find them, cancelled. NGSCB, a next-generation security architecture to be built into Windows, cancelled. I mean, all of this wouldn't have been such a big deal, but since Microsoft unveiled these features to the public just to tell them that they're not getting them, was kind of a blunder. But despite the tumultuous development cycle, Microsoft had managed to get the bug count from over 2,000 to under 500, their usual threshold for release, so they thought they didn't have much to worry about. Although they were about to walk into a storm, they just didn't know it yet.
They say that Windows Vista is just a ripoff of Mac OS X, the Apple operating system.
Oh boy, did people love to egg on this operating system, and maybe it was kind of justified. I mean, I'd be mad if I got a blue screen every day after paying $400 to upgrade. It became a widespread joke across the world how Vista was so shit. Videos were made, memes were shared, and Apple had a field day. Some people claimed that the Vista disaster was directly responsible for Apple increasing their computer market share. And then there were the incredibly famous Mac versus PC ad campaigns that took a dig at Vista every chance they could. And why not? It was popular to hate on it. Not only that, but they took shots at Vista at their developer conferences as well, taking full advantage of the fact that Microsoft had messed up. And at a certain point, their reputation just gets irredeemable. Sometimes products manage to get out of their disastrous reputations, like the PS3, but Vista, sadly, could not. Even though, by the time the service packs rolled around, Vista was actually quite usable. In fact, it was more than usable. You could see the brilliant operating system that had been shrouded by controversy for so long. I never understood why people hated Vista, because I installed it in 2009 after the service packs, and to me, it was the most seamless, compatible operating system I had ever used. In fact, it was the only operating system that was 100% compatible with this IBM ThinkPad I used to use, more so than Windows XP or Windows 7. And installing it today, apart from me failing because of a corrupted ISO, it was actually quite a smooth experience, miles ahead of XP, and dare I say, just as good as Windows 7. In fact, I cannot confirm this with sources, but I have heard through you guys that there's actually very little difference between Windows 7 and Windows Vista. Maybe only a few thousand lines of code. But the only reason Windows 7 was so successful was because hardware had caught up by then, and vendors had learned how to write drivers for Vista. And if they worked on Vista, they'll work on 7, because it's basically the same. Actually, Windows 7 has pretty much the same backwards compatibility issues as Vista. A lot of older programs don't work as they did on XP, but I guess by then we didn't care because it had been 2 more years. I think it's really a case of those classic ups and downs that Microsoft always seems to go through. Windows ME sucks, so expectations nosedive, and XP is great, so expectations go up, and Vista had these issues, so expectations go down, and Windows 7 doesn't have those issues, so expectations go up. Microsoft always seems to suffer through these cycles, and it continues. Windows 7, great. Windows 8, boo. Windows 10, great. Windows 11, not so great. At the end of the day, I think Vista was a subpar operating system that drowned in the voices of the loud minority. It was not stable enough at launch for a lot of people, but for those with powerful enough hardware and the right drivers, Vista was actually quite a breeze. By the time 2008-2009 rolled around, Vista was actually quite a seamless experience. But with the public perception fueled by the negative publicity, Vista had to go. There was no coming back. They even ran an ad campaign where people were asked, how do you feel about Vista? To which most gave the NPC answer, it sucks. So they were told they were about to be given a preview of the new Windows coming, and lo and behold, they loved it, just to find out it was Vista. Is Vista the best operating system ever released? No, not by a long shot. Could Microsoft have foreseen the problems? Yes. Yes, they could have. But is Vista the biggest pile of dog that Microsoft ever created? No, not even close. Vista is a classic case of wrong place, wrong time. In another era, it could have been great, but alas, such is not the case. And instead of being celebrated for what it is, Vista died a slow, quiet death on April 11, 2017. And the world moved on.